Alright, thank you for watching this episode from Classics PC. This episode is about formatting a disk and a very basic introduction to a program called DiskPart. And the reason that I'm giving you this quick little brief intro is because I want you to understand a couple things. One is you can get free help repairing your PC over Facebook Messenger if you like and subscribe to this channel. Then I'm glad to help you over Facebook Messenger remotely with whatever I can. Also, the other thing I want to let you know is if you follow this link because you just want to format a disk and then move on with life, you only need to watch really the first 5 minutes of the video. If that disk that you want to format has recurring problems, or you have other disks that do, watch the whole video. I tried to format it that way so that you could get what you need and then get on with your life. But if you have a disk that is continuing to have trouble, then by all means, watch this whole video. This video really happened because I have redone the video about formatting disks like 4 or 5 times. And the reason that I keep redoing it is because every time I do it, I remember some function in the DiskPart utility that comes on every single Windows 10 computer that would help you with problems that occur when you find yourself in a position that you have to reformat a disk. So what I'm going to do in this video is 2 parts, really. The first part is going to be a very quick introduction to reformatting disks, because I know some of you followed the link to this video and are watching it solely to find out how to format your disk. I'm going to do that part up front so that when it's done, you can kind of go back to whatever you need to do. However, if you want to learn more about how to keep the problems you're experiencing from happening or fix those problems, then keep watching this video, because we're going to use a program called DiskPart to explore disks and fix those kinds of problems. Which you might wonder, well, what kind of problems are those? And there are a lot of them. There are a lot of problems that DiskPart can help you resolve. I think of DiskPart as the program you use to fix what your disks did when you're not looking. And you all know the situation I'm talking about. You got to leave the house. You trust your disks. They are old enough now to be responsible. So you leave them the keys and you go, listen, you guys be good, have fun, but don't have any friends over. Don't defragment or fragment. Don't get corruptions. You stay away from those bad influences like viruses. And when you come back, there is some problem. Your disk did something that you were not aware of it doing. This could be like you downloaded something that ran in the background and corrupted your disk. This could just be a problem with the age of your disk. A lot of times as disks age, they get problems. Even SSDs only have so many uses before they start to have errors. And so this program, DiskPart, will help you solve, in general, disk errors. It'll help you do things like format your disk, which, like I said, we're going to show you the quick way to do that here in just a second. But this will also be a very thorough way of doing it. It'll help you expand or shrink partitions, which is handy if you ever wind up having to work on different partitions from different operating systems. You can repair your drives, like USB thumb drives with it. You can view drive information, assign drive letters. That's just like, what, 5, 6, I'm bad at counting, of the things you can do out of the 38 total commands that you can punch into DiskPart. Although, granted, one of those commands literally does nothing. It's just sort of for editing code. But anyway, so let's say 37 usable commands that you can do with DiskPart. Don't worry, we're not going to walk through all 37, but I want you to be aware of them. I want you to know what they are, and just that way, if you need to use them, you can Google them and research them and find out what you need to do. And these are those 38 commands. Although, like I said, one of them is pretty much useless. It does basically nothing. Also, if you're ever in a position where you want to find these commands and more about them, you can just type help into DiskPart. That's a great place to get started with DiskPart. Exit DiskPart. The one we're going to use today is clean. We're going to use clean to thoroughly format a disk. So the reason that I'm pointing this out is because I want you to understand, before we format your disk, that if you have the problem that causes you to need to format your disk, and it happens again and again and again, you probably need to use a program like DiskPart and some of these commands to fix that problem so you can continue to use that disk if it's usable. It may be completely broken too. So let's jump in. We'll take a look here at DiskPart. The first thing I want to do is show you how to format a disk and then get into this program DiskPart that I'm talking so much about. So first, to format the disk, the easiest way that I think anyways, the easiest way is to use a program called Disk Management. To find it, you can either type it in down here, Disk Management, and it'll show there. But the easiest thing is just to right click, not left click. If you left click, it'll pull up your start menu. We're gonna right click with your middle finger and go to Disk Management. And there it is. Here's disk management. I'm going to enlarge it here to get more of our recording space. Pretty cool. So to format a disk, what you would do is you would take your disk, say it's a USB drive like the one I have here, and plug it into your computer like I'm doing right now. You might even be able to hear me. Here it goes, click. And it's going to show up here in disk management. This is it. 14.58 gigabytes. It's on a 16 gigabyte disk. I'll talk more about that in just a second because I want you to understand the difference there in the sizes, why that happens. But for now, if you wanted to format it, you would just right click and you could do a couple things. You could click format, choose your formatting system, which if it's a Windows computer, stick with whatever comes through default, and then perform quick format. That is it. Watch. It's amazing. That was pretty quick, pretty painless. Now what we're going to do, so if you want to format your disk and that's all you're here for, that's how you do it. So what we're going to do next, though, is we're going to take a bit of a deeper look at formatting disks because sometimes there are problems in them that I'd like to talk about. So for one, I mentioned that I have a 16 gigabyte thumb drive, but it reports 14.58. So the reason for that is that manufacturers are just inaccurate a lot of times in labeling what is usable in the space of their hard drive. There might be that much hard drive space, but only, 14.58 gigabytes out of 16 are usable. Now, it's kind of different by manufacturer to manufacturer. Sometimes it happens because they include software on there that's just hidden and it's designed to help encrypt the files that are on the drive. Sometimes if it's a huge difference, like if that was like 10 or 5 gigabytes, which has happened before, then you might have had somebody kind of scam you. A lot of times when you buy these things online, you end up getting, like for example, I bought a 250 gigabyte micro SD card, plugged it in, it had 4 gigabytes. And upon closer examination, it was literally just a 4 gigabyte micro SD card housed in a 256 gigabyte micro SD card's housing. So you can find dishonest sellers. You can have corrupted data on the drive. And if you have a drive that has been working to full capacity, but suddenly stops reporting full capacity, that is one of the problems you would use DiskPart to repair. So let's jump in. I'm going to show you how we would do that. So first, to access DiskPart, we're going to do the same thing we did to access disk management, which is right-click the Start menu, and then go up to Windows PowerShell. It's going to ask me to verify that I'm an admin, and then it will open Windows PowerShell. And again, you can just type into the search bar here whatever you're looking for, and it will find it. But for our purposes, we'll just do it this way because it's easy. So I'm going to kind of put these so we can kind of reference back and forth for a minute as we start looking at DiskPart and its uses. All right, so now we have Windows PowerShell open. You can also use command prompt. I usually prefer command prompt, but because Windows PowerShell is easier to find on Windows 10, we're just going to use that. Right-click here, Windows PowerShell admin, and it opens up this blue-looking kind of command prompt. So this part is very simple. You just type in DiskPart, not DiskParty. DiskParty is what we're trying to fix, DiskPart. So once you've typed in DiskPart, all one word, it will open up this program, DiskPart. The first thing you should probably do anytime you use DiskPart is list disk. It's a very simple command. You're just telling it to do the thing you want it to do. You want it to see what disks are working on your computer, or what disk your computer is reading. So in this case, this is where we need to start doing some comparison. Because if we were to do something to the wrong disk, we could very much mess up our computer. DiskPart will mess up your computer if you mess this one thing up. So what you do is some comparison. Disk 0 should almost always be the primary drive of your computer, and you should pretty much never do anything to it through DiskPart. There are some exceptions, but for the average user, you probably can always leave disk 0 alone. To confirm that it is the primary drive of your computer, look at how DiskPart lists it. So disk 0 online, 596 gigabytes. If you go back to disk management, you'll see disk 0, and then something a little bit different. It has 2 partitions. While this is different, it is normal because this is your recovery partition. Windows is hiding this partition from DiskPart because this is like the one thing on your computer you should definitely not change. In theory, this partition itself doesn't change unless there's a problem with this partition. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the way it's supposed to work. So Windows does not want DiskPart to see it. Windows does not want DiskPart to report it. Windows does not want you to mess with it through DiskPart. So what Windows is reporting through DiskPart is 596 gigabytes, which does match the primary partition for drive C, 595.6 gigabytes. That discrepancy is not meaningful. In this case, disk management is just reporting a little bit more accurately and DiskPart is rounding up. That is fine. But you would look at these and you'd say, okay, I can confirm that my primary hard drive is indeed disk 0. So that is indeed the one I do not want to mess with. On the other hand, I can also confirm that this disk here, disk 1, is the one you'd want to work on. So we're going to say this thumb drive I plugged in, which in this case is disk 1, has a problem. Maybe it's supposed to be like 32 gigabytes, and it's only reporting 14.5. Or maybe I put files on it, took it to work, plugged them in at work, and can't find those files. That's also pretty common. This also could happen if you're switching back and forth between operating systems. Like for example, if you work on a Mac OS computer and you have a Windows computer at home, or if you're like me and you tinker with Raspberry Pis, there's a lot of different, any operating system switchery can cause disk problems, although it doesn't do it often. It can. So you look at this and you go, okay, I can confirm 14.58 gigabytes. That's what disk management is reporting. DiskPart is reporting disk 1 at 14 gigabytes. That is an okay discrepancy. That's fine. So that's the one we want to work with. We're going to enter another very simple command. Select disk 1. Disk 1 is now the selected disk. Now that disk 1 is the selected disk, we can work on it and we won't mess with disk 0. As long as you have selected a disk other than disk 0, you are fine to continue using DiskPart. Note that what we're about to do will erase everything on disk 1. So you can see why it's very important that you do not select disk 0, because disk 0 has everything in your life on it. It's your main operating system hard drive. So if you were to use this next command on disk 0, you would completely wipe your computer. Only use it on a disk other than disk 0. In our case, disk 1. So the command we're going to type in here is clean. Now the reason that I like to clean a disk every time I reformat it is because it restores space that might have been corrupted, and on many, many, many occasions. So you insert your disk now, and it's going to look like this. It's going to have a black bar and say unallocated, as opposed to what it did before, which was nice and blue like this, with a file system there, a format type there, NTFS. And here, all it says, it's a black bar, unallocated. And what this means is that Windows can't really do anything with it right now. It's mounted. Windows can read it. It knows it's there. But it does not have an operable file system. It's got really, if Windows were trying to read or write something to it, it couldn't do it. So to fix this, you can go back to the way we formatted our disk earlier by right-clicking. But you'll notice now that there is no format option. And the reason for that is because this isn't actually even a volume yet. It's just unallocated, unusable space. So we'll hit New Simple Volume. And now we're going to go back to a wizard that is much like the formatting wizard we used earlier. So this wizard helps you create a simple volume on a disk. A simple volume can only be used on a single disk. To continue, click Next. And all that's saying is you can't set this disk up for RAID this way. You'd have to set it up for RAID a different way, which we're not going to use RAID, so that's fine. Then it's going to show the minimum space on the disk and the volume size. Now you could change this. If you wanted to leave a few gigabytes left over, you could change it to like an even 12 gigabytes, But in our case, we're just going to go with the Windows default. Windows almost always selects the maximum size by default. So we're just going to go with that and do one. If you wanted to format it into two different partitions, this is where you could change that first partition size. But we're going to leave it the way Windows had it. I like Windows. And click Next. You're going to assign a drive letter. You can use any one you want. F is good for now. You can pretty much ignore this. You don't really have anything to do with that. This next part is kind of important. So if you're going to make like a Windows 10 restore disk, at this point in time, you would need to make a change here at this next part, because Windows download to make a restore disk is larger than 4 gigabytes. It'll take up more than 4 gigabytes of space on a disk. Windows by default selects FAT32 to partition a new volume. And I mean, that's fine for anything on which individual files will be smaller than 4 gigabytes in size. Now, that's not to say, and I want to be very specific, that if you format something with FAT32, you can only store up to 4 gigabytes on it. That's not true. Like in our case, we have 14.59 gigabytes of space. We could still store that much stuff on it, but each thing we store would have to be smaller than 4 gigabytes each. So for that case, I like to just go ahead and change this file system to NTFS. It's very similar to FAT32. Most computers that run Windows 10 can run it even from boot, although some cannot, which is why some people don't use it. But these days, most don't have any problem with it. So NTFS can store files that are larger in size than 4 gigabytes. This is important for me because I back up some 3D modeling files and stuff, and they're pretty big. So I like to keep mine open and available. If you uncheck Perform a Quick Format for a 14.59 gigabyte drive, and this particular processor, which I don't remember what it is, it's an i5 something, it's an early model i5, it will take 59 minutes to complete creating this volume and formatting the disk. So quick format is helpful. And the other reason that I never unclick it is because I clean my disks before I format them. And if you unclick this, what it does basically is really, really thoroughly erase the disk and then format it very, very carefully, sector by sector. But if you clean it beforehand, you really just don't need to do any of that. And probably, to be honest, if you don't clean it beforehand, you don't need to do any of that either. So once you have changed it to NTFS, you can add a name. I'm just going to name it Demo Drive. You can leave this checked. It will be checked by default, and click Next. It'll give you a summary of what you're doing. Click Finish, and then just wait a few minutes. I don't even have to pause it. It will take a minute or two, but I want you to see how long it takes. It's very quick, as opposed to unchecking Perform a Quick Format. And there it goes. It's done. So I made a clip last night of it formatting without the quick format option checked. It took 59 minutes. It took a long time. Now that it has done this, we have this volume. It is usable. It is formatted to NTFS, and it's good to go. You have formatted your drive and cleaned it, and probably, if you're having any problems with this drive, the clean command and then creating a new simple volume will solve those problems. If they don't, then your drive might be fried. I had one once that was in a Raspberry Pi, and the Raspberry Pi had a power spike or something, drew too much power, and literally baked the drive, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. So if this doesn't work, you're probably in a position like that, and there's not a whole lot you could do to fix that drive. You might just need to buy a new one. But this, it will fix a lot of problems. So there you go. That's formatting a drive quick and easy. That's a look at DiskPart. That's noticing at least that there are a lot of commands you can use DiskPart for to solve a lot of problems. We used particularly the clean command, and then you can format disks through DiskPart. I find it to be much easier to do through disk management. But yeah, that's how you format drives and why you might need to. Thank you so much for watching this video. As always, please like and subscribe so I can make more of these videos and keep them coming to you for free. I'm also going to add the link to my Facebook and Instagram in the description for those of you who did not come here from my Facebook or Instagram. Thanks again for checking out Classics PC.